Thank you. James Daly.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good morning, Home Secretary. Approximately 90% of the rape allegations that are made to forces in England and Wales are not referred to the Crown Prosecution Service. So essentially the police discontinue those matters. Why do you think that's the case?
Well, I think on rape, there's been a lot of work that's taken place around rape review, which is just the whole rape review approach and strategy was pretty harrowing. There are a number of reasons. I think we should just be very honest about this. A number of reasons as to why cases effectively are not being pursued. Some are with policing in terms of forensics, digital downloads, all the things that I'm afraid familiar and territory and, all the reasons that we know about. That said, though, government isn't just sort of shrugging its shoulders and saying this isn't good enough and, we're not going to do anything about this. From a policing perspective, first and foremost, we have new initiatives. We've got the pilot with Obsteteria, where clearly there's a lot of direct engagement with the police taking place in terms of actually providing more support, digital downloads, but importantly more support for the victims, giving victims confidence to come forward, protecting them throughout all the evidential processes. But, and I say this very strongly, but of course this is about the end-to-end approach, effectively how policing gathers evidence, how cases are put together, how cases then go to the CPS, and then actually the support through that end-to-end system of the criminal justice system, and giving victims the confidence, giving them the confidence to actually go through every single stage of actually then following up with prosecutions.
I agree with that, Home Secretary, but I think I just want to come back to the point. 90% approximately of rape allegations are not going to the Crown Prosecution Service. The police themselves are taking no further action, not referring it on even for advice. That's 90% of the total potential victims of the most horrific offending are not even getting a chance to have
We're trying to change that.
The Crown Prosecution Service. So my question to you is, when you're speaking to the police, why do they tell you that's the case?
So, look, historically there are, I can't really speak about sort of the historical aspects of policing, and the rape review is absolutely trying to tackle this and change this. That's the point. That is the point. And that is about bringing all aspects of the criminal justice system together. It's pretty obvious that what has happened has not been good enough. It hasn't been good enough. You go force by force. I speak about Nottingham again. I saw incredible work in terms of what they do on evidential basis, collection, forensics. I actually saw how they handle rape cases when I was there on Friday. So you've asked the question,
it's about the leadership of the police, then, isn't it?
I'm not going to say that, no. There is inconsistency force by force in policing. There is no doubt about that. There is inconsistency. Historically, force by force, you will know this if I may say so with GMP, data collection, reporting of crime. GMP has had a terrible time on this in the past, and that's a failure of leadership. There's been no doubt about that in Greater Manchester. But force by force, it is not consistent. And specifically now, when you look at the work through the action plan from the end-to-end rape review, the scorecards, progress reports, the work that we are now doing, we want to change all of that. It is appalling. It is absolutely appalling. There should be no excuses. But, as someone, the Home Secretary here, working through these challenges with the Ministry of Justice as well, we've got to do better. We have to change policing attitudes. We have to give them more of the tools and the ability to actually push these cases onto investigation and also support them through the training and the resources that they need.
I think police leaders must be held accountable. But I'll use an example, Home Secretary, on a different offence, but a very serious offence that affects many, many people in our country. So the police failed to solve 1 million burglaries over 5 years up until 2021. 1 million burglaries. Now that is not only frightening, astonishing, appalling. Now, I'm not going to ask you what you feel about that, because I think I know what your answer is going to be. But we didn't need a strategy. We didn't need a discussion regarding how to address this problem, because if we go forward 12 months, and forgive me for looking at my phone here, but there have been, and I quote, this is from the Telegraph, dramatic fall in burglaries after police sent to scene of every break-in. Now, I don't think it would take 50 civil servants to sit in a room to come up with a strategy to say we should send police officers to burglaries. And the three forces which are mentioned here, and thankfully one of them is Greater Manchester. Greater Manchester, Bedfordshire and Northamptonshire, who pledged to send an officer to every burglary. We have seen in the last 12 months significant falls in burglaries. So my point is, we can have all the strategies in the world, we can call everything different, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But if people actually if people actually go and investigate offences correctly and properly, we have positive outcomes for victims.
I would agree with that. Look, I'm not going to dispute a word that you've said. I'd rather not be, we have the beating crime plan for a start. The beating crime plan, absolutely, and rightly so. That is a government strategy. That is a government strategy and plan to beat crime. And within that, of course, you'll understand, all colleagues here understand the structures in policing. Police and crime commissioners, Home Sec, the money coming from central government, how it's allocated across police forces. You're right, absolutely, Mr. Daly. It shouldn't take a strategy and a plan to tell the police officers to go directly to every single reported burglary. But through the beating crime plan we are holding the police to account through these measures.
It's reported here that only three forces in this country are sending police officers to every
we want every single force to do that, and that's the purpose of our work.
But my point is who is accountable in respect of that?
Sure.
Because somebody will have to explain to me why police and crime commissioners exist, because they don't seem to be accountable to anybody for anything.
Well, there is that.
Chief constables seem to be answerable to police and crime commissioners. And then you are up here.
Absolutely.
The last
I'm accountable
line.
For all of them, despite their operational independence and despite the money and the resources that we give them.
So I think policing is a lot less complicated than a lot of people would make out.
Sure.
Go out and arrest people. That tends to be the way to get things done. You don't need to talk about it. Go out and do it when members of the public phone up. Is that an outrageous comment for
No, it's absolutely right. Yeah. It is absolutely right. It really is. The police are actually accountable to the communities within which they serve. They're accountable to the public. Yeah. And wherever you go, and I would say this to all colleagues, speaking as a Member of Parliament myself and not just Home Secretary, you'll know when you hold policing meetings in your own constituency with members of the public, they are angry. They are angry when they're reporting, their tools being nicked from their van, and the fact that officers did not come out to actually look at the van and actually follow up on the crimes. The fact of life is that with the resources and the training and everything that's going into policing right now, record sums, you're right, we shouldn't really need a strategy, but we have a strategy as a government because we are adamant that we should be cutting crime, reducing crime, and aspects of crime, are going down, not all aspects I should add, but even so, it is a statement of the obvious, in my view, for forces to just get out there and follow up on every single crime. And guess what happens when you do? With the resources you get the type of results that the three forces that you've spoken about have.
And the last number of questions is on one subject that I talk about a lot, because I think it is fundamental, is the problem as I see it, having been involved in the criminal justice system for a long time, is not the court system, it's getting the cases into court and how they're investigated prior to charge. I could spend hours with you, Home Secretary, discussing the charging standard, but we'll leave that discussion for another day.
I've spent hours on it too.
Tell me what you think of release under investigation as a concept.
So, how long we got? Release under investigation obviously covers a lot of grounds and has been with a lot of controversy as well. Has been with a lot of controversy. With that though, release under investigation also means that we do have to do a lot of work to protect victims. Who clearly are, the level of vulnerability around victims, particularly through certain cases under release under investigation.
Including rape?
Well, actually, I think rape is the most prevalent one, actually, if we speak about it. Is very hard and very, very difficult. It really is. Release under investigation should not be used, in my view, lightly, or generally, because obviously in the way in which police officers are not acting in fast time, real time, to gather important evidence that could then actually not just safeguard the victims but lead to faster evidential prosecution and getting cases into the criminal justice system.
Unless release under investigation is changed, we're going to continue to have problems. Can I ask either Mr. Rycroft or Ms. Hayes, can you give the committee an idea of the numbers of people who are currently released under investigation in this country?
I haven't got that in front of me, but we can write to the committee chair with that advice. I would add to what the Home Secretary was saying, that the sense that we need across government to be thinking about the whole of the system. As the Home Secretary says, this is not just about policing, this is about joining up with prosecution, with the courts, and then with the prison system. We need to think about it system-wide and make sure that we are progressing the timeliness on every single stage.
Mr. Rycroft, you must, as the Permanent Secretary, have an idea. I'll rephrase the question. What's the average time a alleged perpetrator is, if they are released on bail, is on released under bail? How long are they waiting for something to happen on average?
I'll have to write to you with that information, and I'm very happy to do so. Obviously, it will depend on different crime types. It will probably also depend on different parts of the country, but we will, to expand on the point the Home Secretary was making earlier, we are using the power of transparency, shining the spotlight on individual police forces and policing in general in an accountability framework that reports to the Home Secretary, in order to improve the performance of individual forces. That's precisely what we do through the scorecards and so on.
Last two final questions, and I apologise for being grumpy. I'm astounded that you don't know the figure. Absolutely astounded. It is fundamental that I can tell you now that there are people for the most basic offences, the most basic. If you walk down Bury High Street and somebody punches you in the face, and there are witnesses to that, you are likely to be released under investigation, not charged. And you are likely to be lost within the system for months and months and months. And it is frightening when you consider that this is not just, should we say, what could be considered low-level offending. This is serious offending. Yes. And so it gets back to the point they've been asking questions about. The Home Secretary is here to talk about the strategy, but there has to be accountability from your department as to how you hold police officers to account. And I've given the example. You can come up with all the strategies in the world, but unless that police officer on the street is actually going out and arresting people and doing it in a timely and efficient manner, it doesn't matter what your policy is. And I want to know how your department is ensuring that police, chief constables, police and crime commissioners, whoever it is doing what you want them to do. Because nobody, unless you're going to tell me something different, nobody wants people, the figures that we have for rape, the figures that we have for burglary.
I totally agree with you on the point about accountability and about how the system needs to work together, and that is precisely what we do. In addition to the Criminal Justice Task Force and the other governance structures that we have that look across the whole system, as I was saying earlier, we also have the National Policing Performance Board, which the Policing Minister chairs, which is the body to hold the police, force by force, to account on their overall performance.
It's not working, though, is it? So.
Well, we are using that mechanism in order to drive improvements precisely in the areas that you and other committee members are describing.
I think this is a conversation about process, right? Bureaucracy and structures in government. And at the end of the day, public want to know that officers are actually investigating crime, that criminals are being treated in a very, very serious way. And they want outcomes. They absolutely want outcomes. And we've got tons of process. It's kind of like we're from the government and we're quite good at process, and we just wrap ourselves up in process. There is something here, though, and your line of questioning is really quite important, because actually this comes back to one fundamental aspect about public confidence in policing. The public, we want the public obviously to be confident about policing. We want them to have trust in policing. Look at the conversations that we've had this morning already. We've covered vetting, covered IOPC, all the stuff that actually undermines public confidence. Delivery, absolutely, in terms of accountability, clearly has to be with the local public. But to your point as well, Ms. Daly, chief constables and police and crime commissioners, absolutely are the ones that should be, PCCs in particular, holding the chief and also officers to account on all these core crime types. The Beating Crime Plan, I'm coming back to that very deliberately. We set the framework, we set the targets. We've set targets. We have set targets on crime reduction, serious crimes, because any harm is outrageous. It is absolutely outrageous. But with that, of course, we, through strategic policing board and everything else, we do hold them to account. So I don't want committee to be left under the impression that we're not chasing them and absolutely holding them to account.
My final point is the police are not the social services. They are there to investigate offending. They're not there as a bureaucratic organisation to fill out endless paperwork.
Yes.
There needs to be a reaffirmation to the leadership of the police that the public wants the police to go out and arrest people and put them before the courts. That is it. That's what undermines confidence, not whether all the other things we're talking about. And I know that you understand that, and I will hand over that point.